My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 35 years old, born and raised in Colorado, and I used to believe loyalty was its own kind of inheritance. I grew up in the foothills outside Boulder, in a house built by my grandfather with his own two hands. The Morgans weren't wealthy, but we were known. My dad, Charles, started Morgan and Sons, a custom cabinetry and home interiors business when he was just 24. It was supposed to be a side hustle. It became his legacy. My mom, Diane, handled the front end. She had an eye for aesthetics and a voice that could sell pine as mahogany. From the time I could walk, I was in that shop. Sweeping sawdust, staining shelves, stacking order forms like they were building blocks. I was their only child for nearly 16 years. I was the first son in Morgan and Sons. I didn't see it as a burden. I saw it as a purpose. I gave my 20s to the business. Stayed local for college. Majored in business management, but more importantly, I learned everything hands-on. I turned our website from a joke into a full-scale e-commerce platform. I negotiated new supplier deals. When Dad started having trouble with his knees, I ran deliveries. I managed staff. I did payroll. I built it. Then Ellie came along. My baby sister, 16 years younger, a surprise late-in-life blessing, they said. Ellie was soft and sweet and had this glow around her from the moment she was born. I loved her fiercely. I practically raised her, chauffeured her to school dances, proofread her college essays. And when she graduated from a fancy design school in New York and decided to come back home, I was thrilled. I thought, finally someone to share the load. What I didn't know was, she'd already been promised everything. I found out on a Tuesday. A legal document left on the kitchen counter. My dad's signature stamped next to hers. Transfer of ownership to Ellie Morgan. I wasn't just blindsided. I was disowned professionally. And I had no idea why. This story isn't about bitterness, it's about waking up. It's about what happens when the child who is always there, always dependable, always putting family first, is quietly replaced. If you've ever been made to feel like your loyalty was expected, not appreciated if you've ever been told you're the responsible one, only to find out that means less, not more than, maybe this story is yours. 2. This is how it all began. The day I realized I wasn't part of the legacy, I was just the help. The morning I discovered the transfer document, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced under the hum of the ceiling fan as dawn crept in, and I finally decided I had to face it. No more denial, no more soft refusals to accept the evidence that lay waiting in our kitchen. I slipped on my sneakers and stepped outside into the crisp Colorado air, the cold biting through my thin hoodie, and walked to the shop before sunrise, heart hammering so loud I could hear it throb in every footstep. I needed silence, needed space to think, but I also needed proof. So, I made coffee in my office. The one I'd set up for myself 2 years ago when the business got too big for Dad and Mom to manage alone. Sat behind the same desk, I'd reupholstered myself, and stared at that official-looking paper again. Each word driving a nail into the coffin of assumptions I'd built around myself. Why, Ellie? I asked the empty room, my voice cracking like brittle glass in the hush, because I couldn't wrap my head around it. The document spelled it out clearly even in legalese. It felt like personal betrayal. The business I had shaped, the profits I'd increased, the systems I'd installed, they were now hers. Signed over. Zero discussion. No conversation. Just a fait accompli dropped onto our kitchen table like a grenade. And when I called Dad maybe 15 minutes after I found the paper, my voice was steely, practiced, determined, but inside I was unraveling. He answered groggily, surprise flickering in his voice until he realized what I was calling about. Then the line went quiet, heavy enough to strangle me, and I said, I saw the document. It's effective immediately. Why didn't you tell me? He sighed, old, weary sound coming through the receiver, and mumbled, Rachel, we thought it was best. Thought it was best? I slammed the desk with my fist and whispered, best for who? His sigh became a whisper, Ellie deserves it. That phrase cut deeper than any knife. I hung up. I went into the sales room open area, high ceilings, dust motes in the morning lightened, arranged everything neatly, as if I still owned it. I placed the decorative pillows just so, moved the display table a quarter inch to the left, scraped my fingerprints off the glass surface before I left. Each action was both practical and symbolic, proof that I still belonged here. Because I had to believe I did. Upstairs, I found the same document again, handwritten notes in Dad's faded pen indicating he'd also filed for updated corporate paperwork transferring board seats. Mom had initialed everything. Familiar. I texted Ellie. Hey, sis, can we talk at 10 a.m.? Office. The words felt sterile, but I couldn't let them look too angry. I clicked send. 10 a.m. couldn't come soon enough. When Ellie arrived, stylish, confident, smelling faintly of sandalwood and ambition, I was waiting by the front door. Her eyes widened at me, self-conscious, unsure. Rachel? She said softly. You didn't reply to my text. I stepped aside. The store glowed behind me in morning light. We need to talk, I said evenly. There was a lot I didn't want to doyle, cry, plead, but I wanted calm, at least at first, because I needed clarity. About the business papers. What business papers? She looked around, curious. Don't play dumb, you know what I'm talking about. My voice shook despite my efforts to stay steady. She stilled, glancing at the display cases like they were a minefield. Rachel, please can we talk upstairs? She motioned toward the door labeled, Office Authorized Personnel Only. I nodded and ushered her up the stairs, my chest constricting, stomach a tight knot. Once inside, I closed the door and sat behind my desk as she perched on the leather chair across from me. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked like the nervous kid I used to co-parent. But now, she was the adult who had everything I thought I'd earned. I pulled the document across the desk, sliding it into her line of sight. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up with unsteady fingers. I didn't fully know, she said finally, and I felt a tug of relief. She didn't know everything. That meant they still had to explain themselves. But I needed more, and fear knotted in my throat. Your parents signed over the business everything to you. Without telling me. I leaned forward. Why? Claims of pure intentions came next: duty of care, future investment, their belief that she had the education and energy to take it further. She'd just returned from design school, had big plans for expansion. Rachel, this isn't personal. You've done an incredible job, but... She stopped, eyes watery, hesitating as though she realized she was betraying the person who literally brought her to every recital and coached her through algebra. I deserve this. Deserve? I repeated, my voice maliciously calm. You're not invisible, right? There's room for both of us in this company. Always has been. She reached for my hand. I pulled back. Stop. I'm asking why. Why didn't you say something when they changed everything? She shook her head. I don't know, Rachel. They said it was better this way, less tension, new direction. And, two agreed. She bit her lip. I thought you knew. I stared at her, incredulous. Knew what? That you'd be installed 10 feet over my head without so much as a, hey, would you be okay with that? She looked down. I'm sorry. That word hit like concrete. I waited for more remorse, apology, something, but it never came. We sat in silence, the weight between us crushing. I closed my eyes and thought of my dad's apron, my mom's ledger books, the countless dinners I'd skipped to launch a new website feature. Every memory suddenly branded with her face. I needed breath. Fine, I said, just fine. That word felt like a verdict. She nodded and excused herself. Later, I checked the rest of the paperwork, business filings, transfer of control to her for tax purposes, official recognition by every vendor, bank, client, and even the staff. Not a leak from the board. Employees still reported to me but called her boss. Customers emailed congratulations to the new owner. My phone, once a hub of business calls, became silent. Everything had changed. Everything. The following afternoon, I called my lawyer, the one I'd worked with when the business expanded digitally. Hannah Chen, sharp, principled, fierce protector of what's just. Rachel, she said on the call, your parents can transfer ownership, that's their right. But if it was done through misrepresentation or without your agreement based on your position and contribution, we may have legal recourse. I could hear her pen tapping. I closed my eyes and let her speak the hope back into my lungless chest. I need to gather documentation, your employment records, the agreements, the contracts showing your role, and see if we can prove undue influence, breach of fiduciary duty, maybe even fraud. I would do it. I would gather every scrap of evidence. I would sue for justice. I would not let them bury my sacrifice. That evening, I sat in my car out front of the shop after everyone else left, nightlights casting long shadows across the pavement. I dug into my bag and pulled out a stack of meeting notes, colored tabs and marginalia, emails printed in gray text, budget forecasts and spreadsheets I'd designed. I reread lines where Dad praised me, where Diane asked for my input, where Ellie CC'd me but never followed up. Notes I'd taken in shorthand, scrap pieces of receipts. I spread them across the seat and whispered to the night, you'll remember who I am. My phone buzzed. Text from Ellie. Want to grab dinner tomorrow? Mom says she wants everyone together. My fingers trembled. I stared at the words. Dinner. Family time. Our old routine. But the subtext fed poison. She knew. Of course she knew. They'd talk about things at dinner. Things I wouldn't be in on. The room would freeze when I walked in, others staring at me like someone had swapped my face with a stranger's. I deleted the message. Then typed, let me think about it, thanks. I didn't send it. I didn't know how to go home. I didn't know how to look Dad and Diane in the eye again. I didn't know how to talk to Ellie after she took it all and pretended I was still part of it. The shop is quiet now. The lights are off. Tomorrow the sun will rise again. Maybe I'll bring legal documents with me. Maybe I'll turn them over at the dinner table. Or maybe I'll stand there, collected, poised, and ask, why? And see who cracks first. Because at this point, I needed more than answers. I needed restoration. And I was done waiting for it. Some mornings, I wake up with the taste of bitterness still clinging to my tongue, and today is one of those mornings. I stroll into the showroom long before anyone else, my steps echoing across the polished hardwood floors, and I'm struck by how quickly everything has changed. The new display showcasing Ellie's vision. The framed photo of her in that gallery shoot hanging where our founder's portrait used to stand. Even the staff lunch menu conveniently catered to her favorite diet. It's as if someone flipped a switch, erased my presence, and replaced it with her brand new identity. My name still lingers in company emails, but I know the second I walk out the door, it deserts me. I remember that image so vividly. Ellie's design board pinned in the corner, bright colors I never would have chosen, bold patterns that spoke of ambition and rebellion. A physical manifestation of what she now represents, fresh, upward, unburdened by the history that still anchors me to this place. I touch the board's edge and feel a pang in my chest, as though I'm touching the wound on my heart. It had been 2 weeks since the news broke and 2 family dinners that I didn't attend, preferring instead to spend evenings re-examining contracts and statements, emailing vendors to reassure them of my continued involvement, assuring clients that I hadn't vanished. But inside, I was suffocating, my pride flaring hotter each time someone referred to me as former manager, as if I'd traded my devotion for some cushioned resignation. This morning, as I arrange a stack of fabric swatches, my phone buzzes with a group chat notification. Family group. Morgan. I glance at Mom's name on top, then Dad, then Ellie. Message from Diane. Morning, darling girls. Breakfast tomorrow at 8? Big news. 2 emoji zone with a megaphone, another with confetti. I stare at those words and feel my chest tighten. Big news. What else isn't mine now? I open the chat and type. Can we postpone for now? But my confidence flees before I can press send. The blinking cursor mocks me. What else could I say without sounding needy? Can I have a seat at the table? My finger hovers over the delete key until the message vanishes. Instead, I press into the mirror behind the counter, my reflection framed by chandeliers and showroom lighting. The person staring back is unfamiliar. Silver streaks in my hair, tension in my jaw, exhaustion in those brown eyes. I used to recognize her. She used to glow with pride. I clutch my apron pocket until my nails bite into my skin. I'm still the same, aren't I? My assistant, Clara, arrives with the coffee I requested the day before. She looks flustered, her cheeks pink, but brightens when she sees me. "Morning, Rachel," she says, voice gentle. "Clients coming in soon." She glances at the swatchboard. Ellie's new line looks amazing. I swallow hard. Her words feel like a punch. "Thanks," I say, forcing warmth into my voice. "Let's prep." Inside, though, I want to tell Clara, you have no idea what this means. You have no idea how much it hurts. But I don't. I nod and walk behind the counter so she can get back to it. Then comes the email ping subject line. Our next project. I inhale sharply and open it. It's from one of our longtime clients, praising Ellie's vision and requesting a meeting with her directly. I scroll through polite niceties. Subtle changes: Rachel and Ellie to co-lead becomes Ellie to lead. Rachel CC'd. My stomach twists. CC'd. I'm reduced to a courtesy carbon copy. Lunch arrives without invitation. I eat at my desk. My phone rings. It's Dad. I stare at the screen for 15 seconds before answering. "Rachel," he says softly. "How are you holding up?" "Fine," I lie. "I'm just busy." Understandable. I hear a deep breath. There will be a company meeting next Thursday. We want everyone on the same page. "You knew I know," I murmur, but he doesn't reply. "Okay," he says. "See you then." The line goes dead. I sink into my chair and stare at the desk, feel my pulse racing. A meeting. The final stage show. I can almost hear the slow-motion footsteps of my confidence walking out the door. That night, I sit in my small apartment above the garage boxes, still half unpacked, lights dim, as if even the space doesn't know what to do with me anymore. I stare at the walls, and everything feels hollow. I begin to journal, writing in long, looping cursive, the only way my thoughts feel real. They've taken my role. They've replaced me with the girl I helped raise. My pen falters. I trusted her. Mayaf clenches. What choice do I have now? I'll spare you the pages smeared with tears and regrets, but I want you to know how lonely and small they made me feel in those weeks, the first loss of belonging, the erosion of my identity from the company that once carried my name in every invoice and in every smile of a satisfied customer. I finally closed my journal and stared out the window over Boulder's city lights, white diamond against black sky. I tried to breathe, but each inhale felt like swallowing broken glass. I thought of Eliatha's sister I loved, the sibling I mourned. And I imagined her at home, leaning over her laptop, texting our parents, exchanging inside jokes about the new project launch. All things I once shared with her. I thought about writing her a letter, something long and vulnerable. I craved symbolic justice. Maybe my anger would even coax an apology out of her, or at least rekindle some empathy. But the night pressed in, and in the end, I fell asleep on the couch with that unsent draft blinking at me in my inbox. "Hey Em, I miss us. I miss you. Can we talk?" The next day, I walked into the shop carrying that unsent letter in my bag, and I realized it wasn't enough anymore. I'd tried politeness. I'd tried distance. I'd tried everything but fight. And that's when I understood that the real conflict wasn't between me and Ellie, it was between who I was and who I was now being forced to become. Tomorrow would bring that company meeting. I'd walk in as Rachel Morgan, daughter of Charles and Diane, veteran manager, founder's right hand, or I'd walk in as Rachel Morgan, sidelined, CC'd, a courtesy. I could feel the weight of that decision settling under my ribs. So now, as the city hums below and the night stillness presses against my window, I make a vow. I may feel small today, but I refuse to disappear. I will not be the shadow laughed at in board meetings, nor the name comfortingly mentioned when congratulations were doled out. No, tomorrow, I will go back and plant my feet. I will sit in that meeting, speak when I need to speak, and remind everyone including myself why Morgan & Sons was built on my work. And when they say, Ellie's vision, I will say it too, but I will add, guided by the hand that shaped it. Because this family business isn't hers, it isn't theirs alone anymore. It's mine too, and we're about to have the biggest family meeting of our lives. When Thursday's announcement rolled around, the showroom buzzed with a nervous energy that felt like static under my skin, and I stepped inside 10 minutes early not because I wanted more time, but because I needed it. A pocket of calm before the storm I felt in my bones. I paced by reception, hand trailing over worn-edged wood that I had sanded myself, smelling the faint residue of stain and sawdust and memories, grounding myself with each breath before I entered the conference room where our firearms-grade fluorescent lights waited to expose whatever vulnerability I'd brought with me. The room was already half full. Clara, the assistant manager, clutching her tablet as though it might protect her. Mark, the lead carpenter, looking at the ceiling in boredom. Vendors wandering through the glass door, their faces polite but curious. And at the head of the table stood my father, flanked by my mother and Ellie, who wore an uncomfortable smile that made her cheeks pink. Beside her sat our accountant and the lawyer, their presence a reminder that this wasn't about coffee clutches, it was about something official, something cold. I sat down at the exact place I'd reserved years ago, at the head on the left my strategic territory. Although the seat had been empty for months, it felt familiar. When Dad opened the meeting, his voice steady, practiced, I noticed how he avoided looking at me, instead addressing Ellie with a warm tone entirely inappropriate for the circumstances. Ellie, you're going to walk us through the new organizational structure. As she stood, shoulders straight and voice quivering only a little, I realized we were already past the point of reclaiming balance. Beneath her presentation, I noticed subtle phrases under my leadership. Ellie's team. My direction notes that silently rewrote the company lineage, and I felt something inside me stiffen into ice. My turn came when I cleared my throat before asking, Dad, can I clarify the ownership percentages? I see Ellie now holds 70% of shares, but I thought we were discussing a 50-50th split. The lawyer shifted, pressed a pen, but Dad made a dismissive gesture just enough to shut me down. His voice lowered. Rachel, this was carefully structured for successful transition and tax purposes. The final documents are on file with the state. I could feel other eyes glancing between Ellie biting her lip, Mom fixing her gaze on the table. I said, transition that involve me. I don't want to overthrow anything, I just want to be working with you. My chest ached as even my own words felt like pleading. But instead of empathy, I got a statement from Ellie, calm, rehearsed. Rachel, you're an amazing manager. But the shareholders decided that I should be the face of the new brand. You're still valued in operations. I wanted to laugh. She'd just stripped my title in front of the staff. Was that validation? I glimpsed Clara and Mark exchanging uneasy looks, and I felt the air grow thicker, expectations shifting. Someone else would now open vendor calls with Ellie's name. Someone else would step out to meet press. I was being sidelined in my own creation. The meeting moved on project timelines, marketing strategies, design rollouts, and I participated, of course, listing key deadlines, budget concerns, staffing needs. But the room's attention flickered elsewhere every time Ellie spoke. A vendor representative raised a question about lead times. She answered with technical precision and then turned to Dad for backup. He nodded at her like she'd done this 100 times, not 2 weeks ago. And I watched, in a blur of shame, as my place, once secure and earned, flickered in that room like a sometimes bulb. Later that afternoon, after the meeting ended and vendors drifted back into the light of afternoon and the air conditioning hummed, Mom gently approached me, touching my arm, something she never did. I braced myself for warmth, for apology, for something. But instead she said, Darling, we all need time to adjust. You're still in operations, and that's important. Too important to mention? Too important to hold. My face flushed, voice steadying as I said. So I don't hold any equity? None? She fumbled. It's rebalancing, honey. I swallowed. She walked away. Then came the whispers, barely audible, Clara asking, "Did you realize Ellie now signs our checks?" Mark murmuring, "We always thought Rachel was in charge." A familiar ache of invisibility washed over me. And after the staff filtered out, I was left again alone with that half-dozen white walls and the faint hum of equipment, everybody gone again, and I felt smaller. That evening, I drove home under darkening skies, the falling snow toward the Rockies outside making me want to pull the car over and cry. I didn't because I'd hidden crying in the office, on my apartment couch, in my car, at stoplights. I needed control now. But inside, I was a storm. I composed an email to my leadership team, Clara, Mark, our HR coordinator, explaining that while company structure had shifted, my role would remain consistent for the time being, and that I would personally oversee all operational processes to ensure stability. I wanted to control the narrative or maybe just keep myself anchored. I clicked send. At least something in this company still belonged to me. That night, as my apartment grew cold and I walked barefoot into the kitchen for a glass of water, I paused, noticing the ice still on the sink faucet. It felt like a sign, cold, unyielding, telling me I needed to thaw, or I would freeze here forever. I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document titled Operations, Rachel's Responsibilities, that I hoped Mom wouldn't read before I did. I began listing every task, timeline, system owner, backup owner, mapped everything I could think of to ensure that if I walked away, my absence would be obvious. Not spite, clarity. Maybe it's petty. Maybe I'm clawing at control because that's what the business has always been to me. But when vigilance felt hollow, I also wrote a draft letter to Dad. A long, vulnerable piece explaining what I'd seen, felt, and why I couldn't keep pretending it was okay. I never hit send. But I printed it anyway. Staples, fold, envelopia, tangible reminder that I wasn't silenced. When Ellie texted later, "Dinner tomorrow, okay? Family time." I paused again. My heart split into jagged pieces, longing for connection and rage at being wounded. I didn't reply. I fell asleep with the letter beside me on the bed, and I woke to bleak dawn, knowing the next morning I would walk into the shop wearing armor I hadn't worn since a child. A carefully measured smile, spreadsheets stacked like shields, and in my pocket, that printed letter. The injustices were mounting, exclusion from ownership, erasure of my identity, replaced by a smiling face wearing my hard-won reputation. But 2 weeks had passed since the lawsuit talk, and I informed Hannah, my lawyer, of the new meeting minutes, staff reactions. She called back. "We've got you, Rachel. We're building the case. But emotionally, this is yours to weather." I flinched, but she was right. So I geared up. I filed my documents, stacked my spreadsheets, fortified myself for the long haul. Because it's not just about proving my worth, it's about reclaiming my place in a company I built, in a family that built it, and in my own story. I awoke the next morning with the weight of my printed letter burning a hole in my pocket, the one that contained every confession of hurt I'd never dared voice aloud. And as I walked into the showroom, the familiar scent of polished pine and oak greeted me like an old friend, yet my heart was still jangling with tension, every breath tasting like anticipation. I decided. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. I would earn it back, not demand it. I would speak through results, through ideas, through the undeniable facts of my dedication, not through emotional appeals. My phone buzzed. It was Clara, confirming a major client pitch I'd arranged months ago. A rush of determination surged through me. This was my moment. I gathered my team in the corner office, a space I'd revamped with ergonomic chairs and light-filtering curtains to foster collaboration, but which now bore the unsaid tension of shifting leadership. I offered coffee and pastries, caramel pecan danishes, Eleanor's design favorite, though somehow still bittersweet, and smiled at eyelids lowering with sleep. Masks slipping for the first time since everything had changed. "Okay, team," I said firmly, voice calm but anchored deep in purpose. Ellie's design insight is groundbreaking, but we also have a logistics challenge on the Holland account. I want us to solve it today, and with excellence. This is our chance to shine. I handed out timelines and assigned tasks. I didn't mention ownership, but every word was charged with intent. This company still functions because someone's paying attention, and I was going to prove I still care, still deliver, and still matter. The afternoon rolled on, and I hopped from desk to warehouse floor, checking grain consistency, verifying stain samples, confirming weld strength, listening closely to staff concerns. We're running low on Jacobian stain. The Holland client wants delivery next Friday, not Monday. Are we shipping overseas again? Each question became a thread I wove into a solution. I recalculated logistics, confirmed shipments with vendors, and texted our transport partner at 3 p.m. Picking up Holland order Friday, ETA Tuesday. I added my initials. And then, crucially, I forwarded the update to the leadership group chat, CFO, HR, marketing head, and yes, Ellie. I could almost feel the shift just a fraction, like wind shifting east to west. It wasn't about proving Ellie wrong. It was about proving that I still walk the floors, still sweep the dust, still make decisions under pressure. I left the warehouse just as the Holland order forklift backed out, loaded and sealed, and I stood quietly as the morning light sliced through half-open loading docks, watching that pallet breathe its readiness for delivery. My chest tightened not with entitlement, but with ownership. That evening, I drafted a concise email to clients. Dear Holland Home, as per our conversation, shipment is scheduled for pickup Friday, ETA next Tuesday. Please let me know if any questions. I signed it Rachel Morgan, Senior Operations Lead, Morgan & Sons. No apology, no resentment, just delivery of fact. I hit send and leaned back, satisfied. At home, I practice neutrality. I read legal articles. I copied case studies fiduciary duty in family business. Reasonable expectations of founders' children. Cases of undue influence. I opened a spreadsheet labeled evidence and began logging dates, emails, messages, meeting notes, patterns. For every screenshot or memo, I inserted a comment. Supports contribution. Compare to ownership. My discipline calmed me. The next morning, the Holland Home reps called. They were thrilled with the efficiency and clarity. They commented on the professionalism, on the clear communication channels, and when they asked to speak with the responsible person at Morgan & Sons, I offered them my cell. The call lasted 15 minutes. They complimented systems, appreciated the proactive updates, and closed by praising Ellie's creative leadership before acknowledging the operations backbone. They said, "Your coordination made this seamless, Rachel. Thank you." My heart swelled, realizing that while I might be invisible to some within the company, I still matter to the world outside. At lunchtime, I found Clara and Mark in the break room. I brought sandwiches turkey for Clara, veggie wrap for Mark, and cheeks warmed as I said, "Thanks for your help. This Holland project matters." I looked at their faces, tired but grateful, maybe. I wanted to say more how proud I was, how much I valued each of them, but I didn't. Instead I said, "We make things happen, and we'll keep doing it." The words felt like armor. Back at my desk, I opened the leadership group emails. I wrote, "Friends and team, just a heads up that operations timeline is stable, shipment scheduled, backup process in place. Let me know if any questions." I made sure Ellie saw it, blue check mark under her name. No boasting, no bitterness, just evidence. And a narrative. That night I worked late, illuminated by the blue glow of my laptop and warehouse motion sensor lights blinking off behind the glass partition. I updated cost projections, condensed logistics notes, smoothed out discrepancies. I knew my diligence might be invisible to some, but it wasn't invisible to me. I closed my laptop at 9:17 p.m., precisely. I put the printed letter back into my bedside drawer, runsent for no end, reached for my phone. No family group texts, no invitations. Only the quiet, resolute beat of my heart. In the days that followed, I continued the momentum. I initiated biweekly ops meetings with Clara, Mark, and HR to ensure smooth cross-department communication. I wrote a brief process improvements memo outlining 3 cost-saving ideas. I spearheaded a mentor session with a vendor I'd cultivated, offering insight to our newer staff. Every email, every memo, every call was a pebble thrown into the pond, sending ripples that dissolved beneath the surface but changed the water forever. One morning, I walked into the shop and found the Holland shipment sign-off posted on the main board. Shipped 6/14, on schedule, great work, team. Underneath it, my name and title glistened in bold. I paused, letting the recognition wash over me. It wasn't approval from the family, but it was a sign that I still exist in this company's heartbeat and that my heartbeat still matters. Later, I received a private message from a staffer. "Rachel, thanks for upstairs memo. Really helpful to know you're still leading ops." Clara. I typed back, "Always." Those 2 words felt stitches in the tear of my confidence. With each day, I was forging my own revival, not by reclaiming what I'd lost, but by building what I still have. And sometimes, that's more powerful. I know Ellie is watching and I suspect she's uneasy. I catch her in doorways, mid-conversation, eyeing a spreadsheet or a cleared project. I sense that the ownership transfer didn't give her the operational backbone she thought she could rely on. In moments like that, I swallow my frustration and offer help. "Need a hand with vendor schedule, Ellie?" She nods quietly. I show her the folder. I walk her through the process. We don't speak about lawyers or lawsuits or betrayal. We speak about wood grain schedules, lead times, and invoicing. And that's what matters. Every so often, I think about delivering the printed letter. The words I wrote circling inside me like a caged bird. But I remind myself, I don't need them to hear it. I just need them to see it. And they're seeing it. In timelines, in shipment receipts, in email acknowledgements, in spreadsheets labeled Operations, Rachel Morgan. They may not like that I still exist. They may not want to admit that I still matter. But the numbers, and the clients, and the team, they can't deny it. And so I keep going. One day at a time. One shipment. One design collaboration. One small victory. They can give away equity and titles, but they can't give away my competence or erase my history. Not when I still show up, day after day. Because sometimes, the comeback is quiet. It's internal. It's steel beneath skin. And it's unstoppable. A week later, I walked into the shop just as morning light streamed through the tall showroom windows, laying long patterns across the shiny floorboards, and immediately felt the undercurrent of tension in the air. It was meeting day again. This time for strategy presentations with key investors flown in from Denver and Phoenix, and the energy felt tight, like a stretched canvas ready to snap. I checked in at reception. Clara's usual cheerful greeting was replaced by a tight-lipped note. I felt a familiar knot at the base of my throat. Perhaps it was anticipation or dread, but more than anything, it was the quiet realization that this meeting would test everything I'd worked for. I entered the conference room early, palms pressed flat against the long table, and arranged my notes beside Ellie's presentation materials, her name already printed in sharp font beside mine on the polished placard. Vance and Partners, the investor group, arrived soon after. 3 suited men with calculating eyes and leather portfolios. They nodded at me politely, offering smiles but never acknowledging me by name while reserving warm greetings for Ellie. My stomach tightened. I inhaled slowly, remaining still. I am still here. The meeting began with Ellie presenting the new design line, her voice confident as she outlined market projections for the next 5 years. Investors nodded, asked questions, were pleased. Afterward, I stepped forward, open binder clasped in hand, and presented the operational backbone that would deliver on those projections: logistics, warehouse workflow, staffing, cost control, vendor pipelines. I walked them through lead times, redundancy plans, quality assurance metrics. I didn't mention family or fairness or betrayal. I spoke of data and timelines. I spoke of promise and reliability. I spoke of Morgan and Son's future with me, keeping the gears turning. My throat burned, my voice thrummed with emotion, but I held steady because I understood that in that room, evidence is power. After I finished, one of the investors, a tall man named Brooks, leaned forward. "Miss Morgan, you've clearly run these operations with expert precision. Without you, the numbers falter." He paused. "Moving forward, this has to be part of any structure." My chest tightened like he'd thrown a lifeline. I offered a small, grateful smile. The other two nodded. Ellie exhaled quietly beside me, her shoulder touching Minnie, and I realized something fundamental was shifting. I wasn't invisible anymore. When the meeting ended and the investors filed out some with firm handshakes and mention of future collaboration, I studied their faces and saw respect, even admiration. And then came the low voices. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the duel of glances was over. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt a new fire stoke itself inside me. If respect was mine to earn, then validation was mine to seize. That afternoon, I received a calendar invite titled Board Review, Ownership and Roles. My name was in bold beside Ellie's. The invite emphasized family unity, transparency, and future vision. A fresh opportunity or a trap? I felt both. I accepted. Later, Mom texted, "Dinner tonight at ours. Please come." I stared at the words, then pausetto, "I go in peace, or ready to fight." I typed, "Could you please confirm time? I'll be there." Then immediately regretted the neutrality but left it. No invitation, no constraints, no conditions. I spent the rest of the day preparing. Printouts, slide decks, talking points. I drafted possible scenarios, questions they might ask, objections raised, concessions I could make. I read psychology articles on negotiation. I rehearsed in front of the living room mirror, voice calm, posture confident, but heart resolute. I deserve this. I earned this. That evening, I drove to my parents' house, the lights bright against the dusk sky, and tightened my fingers around my purse so hard my knuckles went white. I rang the doorbell and waited. It swung open, Dad first, a polite smile, then Mom behind him, relief flooding her face. Ellie came next, hugging Mom, then turning to me with a hesitant, forced grin. For a split second, I felt warmth for her. She looked vulnerable, unsure, maybe afraid. Then that familiar ache bloomed under my ribs. I nodded, stiffly, and walked in. The house smelled of roast chicken and rosemary, like every Sunday they hosted. The dining table was set, formally lights dimmed, linen napkins, crystals polished. I sat, still hungry from anxiety. Ellie was across from me, fiddling with her napkin. Dad poured wine for every except me, water for me, subtle signal. I caught his eye and drank quietly. Conversation started on neutral topics. Ellie's new project, Mom's gardening. Then they said, "We have something to discuss." Eyes on Ellie and me. I held my breath. Dad cleared his throat. "We appreciate how you both handled the investor meetings today and want to address your roles going forward." He turned to Ellie. "Ellie, you'll remain majority owner and brand lead." She nodded, relief shining in her eyes. Then he looked at me. "Rachel, we're proposing you hold the title of Chief Operating Officer to cement your role officially." My code, locked heart pulsed. Coup. Title, recognition, equity? I kept my face neutral as I processed the offer. Mom smiled. "It's been our wish to see you recognized properly for your dedication." But Ellie's face shifted. I saw the ledger. Behind Ellie's gratitude, I sensed calculation. I couldn't read her thoughts, but I instantly suspected she thought me appeased. This was a peace offering to buy my silence. I took a breath, slow, even, steady. "Thank you," I began. "I'm honored by the title, but I want clarity. Does COO come with corresponding equity or decision-making power?" Dad cleared his throat. I relied on Hannah's prepped phrasing. "I believe that recognition of responsibility should be accompanied by equity reflective of contribution." I even lowered my voice to a chair, Tempo, to invest the words with calm authority, not accusation. Dad hesitated. Mom glanced away. Ellie stiffened. We're open to discussing equity in due time. Dad replied, voice careful. For now, it's the title. Mom added gently. And access to board meetings. Ellie nodded. I thanked them again. I didn't raise concerns further, not yet, but inside I catalogued every flicker, every hesitation, every pause, evidence. The dinner continued with polite conversation, but under the surface the air buzzed a current of unfinished business. Ellie made a small diversion. I'd love your advice on the marketing brief, Rachel. I saw moments of connection flicker. I could respond with openness. I said, I have some ideas, should we walk through them tomorrow? Her eyes brightened, relief washed her face. I nodded, and I believed in that gesture, even if she didn't. Afterward, as I drove home through dark neighborhoods, I felt the edges of relief soften into something more powerful. Resolve. I'd entered their home feeling hungry for acknowledgement, and I'd left with title, respect, and the promise of satellite equity. But I'd walked back in, too, recommitting to strategy instead of emotion, to negotiation instead of accusation. That night, I added set up equity plan discussion to my personal planner. I drafted an email to Hannah. Coup offer accepted with caveat. Begin equity groundwork? Her reply was immediate. Smart move, let's build from here. I breathed out. Because the tension hadn't gone away, it had just evolved. Now it was a chess game of titles, roles, influence, and truth. Ellie's eyes had flicked with defiance when I pressed the equity issue. Dad's smile had stiffened. Mom's apology was in her eyes. And I knew that the next confrontation would be harder. Beyond numbers and strategy, it would touch trust, legacy, and family. The pieces had been laid. Now it was time to play. The days after dinner hung over me like dark clouds refusing to drift. I wore the title of Chief Operating Officer, a weightier badge than I'd allowed myself to believe. Yet it clashed against the emptiness in my chest, recognition with no ownership, respect with no roots, acknowledgement with no stability, and each day, I sat in my beautifully organized office and stared at the empty corner where a leather chair waited, unclaimed, as if mocking me with its silent expectance. I'd won a title, but lost so much more. The simplicity of family dinners, the belief that loyalty meant security, the knowledge that I belonged. One night, I sat alone in the conference room long after the light switched off, my phone face down beside my last coffee, and I trembled as tears spelled out a message of surrender I didn't send. Do I even belong here anymore? The echo in the empty room seemed to laugh. I shut the laptop, wiped my cheeks, and drove home on roads slick with rain. Headlights painted halos on wet pavement, and in that glistening blur I saw how small I'd grown beside the enormity of loss. At home, I barely ate, and sleep fled me like a bird spooked from its nest. Dreams became corridors in unfamiliar furniture showrooms where my voice echoing answers no one heard. The printed letter, the one I refused to send, sat in my bedside drawer, mocking with its unsent truths. The title felt brittle, a facade that could shatter the moment someone asked, "What do you really own?" My therapist, Dr. Reynolds, asked about my stress, but I couldn't confess that the hardest part wasn't the legal fight or the boardroom power struggle. It was the simple ache of waking up and feeling unwelcome in the life I'd built. I told her, my voice barely a whisper. I feel like an intruder, in my own company, my own family. She scribbled notes, nodded, but couldn't fix that kind of pain. Later that night, I reread the letter again and cried over words I hadn't given myself permission to speak. Why did you choose her over me? Until my voice became a sob. One weekend, I barely answered my phone. I canceled dinner with a mentor. I even skipped a meeting with a vendor who'd asked to meet with the COO in confidence. I sat in silence. The title felt hollow. The board invite I'd received still rattled, like a sarcasm-laced key to a door I wasn't allowed inside. And then came the meeting invitation. Family Council Sunday noon. That's how they titled it. Council. a gathering of unity, transparency, and direction. I stared at my calendar for minutes, a syringe of loneliness entering my veins. Would my title protect me? Would COO win this round or just expose how far I truly stood from belonging? I wondered if the only thing I'd inherited was conflict, and if resolution was ever really on the table. Sunday morning dawned bleak, the Rockies muted beneath a haze of cloud, and I drove to the house with my printed letter pressed into my coat pocket like a talisman. I practiced opening line strategic, calm, firm, but heard only my racing heartbeat and the rush of fear that I might break when the door opened. At noon, I rang the doorbell. Ellie greeted me first, smiling, hair escaping from her bun. I nodded. Dad stepped aside. I walked in, carrying my notepad, binder, letter, and a faint hope. Inside, the living room looked smaller than I remembered, as if the house had shrunk in the weight of conflict. I sat on the couch between Mom and Ellie, but my heart felt miles away. Dad sat opposite me. They all checked their phones, cleared throats, arranged their posture as though preparing for a performance. I took a shaky breath. Dad began. We called this council to discuss company future, roles, and healing. His eyes flicked to me. Then Ellie, then Mom. Despite the carefully chosen words, I heard the subtext. We want peace, but on our terms. Ellie went first. She talked about her vision, new partnerships, bold moves, momentum. I listened but felt the divide widen. Then Mom spoke, apology edged in her voice, nostalgia, hope. She looked directly at me. Rachel, I know this has been hard. But her next sentence slipped past me, drowned in the cold crust of formality. We need to trust the structure now. Trust the structure. Trust that they had transferred my future to someone else. When it was my turn, I felt everything behind my ribs rush up like tannin in a choke cherry anger, sorrow, betrayal, pride, longing, defeat. I stood, binder clutched tight, decision made. I strode to the center, voice low, yet clear. I appreciate the roles we've been given, but I need more than roles. I need clarity. I need equity that reflects contribution and responsibility. I need reassurance that the company isn't just a brand under Ellie's vision. It's a team, with me at its operational heart. My voice wavered. I stabbed a finger at the binder. I have documents that show my contributions, my investment, my decisions that built this. I want them considered alongside trust. They sat quietly. The air felt thin. Mom's hand trembled on the couch. Dad looked at Ellie, searching. Ellie's face went pale, but she didn't move. I felt the spotlight shift their eyes on me, judgment and guilt and love tangled in their gazes. I wished for an ally. I found none. Then Ellie spoke, voice soft but resolute. Rachel, I know you worked hard. But this is new for all of us. I need room to lead. I want to collaborate, and if we adjust equity, we should wait until the next fiscal review. She nodded gently. It wasn't an embrace, it was distance wrapped in cautious diplomacy. Mom cleared her throat. We just need stability. I nodded, but inside, knots tightened. I knew we weren't past this. We were deeper in. The council ended with no votes, no decisions, no agreement. Just promises. We'd revisit next quarter. We'd trust each other. We'd hold family first. Afterward, Ellie hugged me awkwardly. I half returned. Dad and Mom said thanks. I managed a smile. But inside, I felt unmoored. I drove home through empty roads, the printed letter now crumpled in my jacket pocket. I slid it into the passenger seat and stared at it as streetlights flickered. Is this how far trust falls? One signature? One transfer? At home, I placed the letter on my desk, its unsent words poised like a neck ready to be slit. I considered sending it, but paused. I realized. Trust, equity, recognition, none of it held substance without action. And I wasn't done. Not nearly. That night, I emailed Hannah. Sunday council happened. No resolution. I need next steps. She replied, your move, gather board support, prepare case. We're not going backward. I closed the laptop, tears threatening again, but with them came a steel thread of resolute fire. Pain lingas bot resolve bilds. I fell asleep with the letter beside me, bound together by despair, fear, and determination. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow I continue. Alone or together, I will press on. Something shifted in the air the next morning, an almost electrifying tension that crackled through the showroom as if the walls themselves were bracing for impact, and when I stepped through those doors, binder in hand and heart pounding, I sensed that today would change everything. The day's schedule included a surprise. Early morning meeting with just the three of us, Dad, Mom, and Mebbled as a follow-up to Sunday's council. Ellie knew nothing, which meant the playing field would finally be mine to walk on alone. I found them in the glass office, not separated by nameplate or title, but seated shoulder to shoulder on the same side of the table. I swallowed and closed the door behind me, leaving the world outside and Ellie's burgeoning empire unseen. Dad nodded for me to sit. Mom's fingers twitched around a coffee mug. I settled in, gazing at their familiar faces framed by decades of family photos, and I realized this was the moment where the facade would crack. Mom cleared her throat and began, voice hesitant, "Rachel, we want to show you something." She slid a manila folder across the table, the type I recognized from attorneys. My pulse spiked as I opened it to reveal emails, journal entries, and transaction records, some of which I had never seen. Snapshots of conversations. Dad's terse messages to Ellie before the transfer, Mom's own journal lamenting, "Rachel doesn't express that she cares anymore," Ellie's own texts admitting doubt, "Am I truly cut out for this?" And, shockingly, a private letter from Ellie to a third-party consultant asking whether they'd positioned Rachel as the fall guy if things go south. I blinked. The room spun. A mist of cold fear and hot anger flooded me. Dad lifted his voice, steadier now. "We held off because we didn't want you to feel ambushed, but we thought you should see it wasn't just about scholarship or readiness. We were terrified your hurt would derail our plans, that you'd walk. We thought if we let Ellie grow first, then we could reel you back without losing momentum." My bangs caught the overhead light. I swallowed hard. Fear, disbelief, clarification that the betrayal wasn't just strategic, it was shaped by fear. Mom's voice broke. "It became messy. We didn't mean for it to turn into this." Her eyes glistened. Dad leaned forward. "That's why we didn't include you in negotiations. We thought this was the easier path." The words hit like glass shards. I thought of the meetings where I'd been sidelined, the dinners where I didn't count. I thought of the COO title offered but no equity attached, and I realized they hadn't just hurt me. They'd been hurt too by fear of losing one daughter in favor of another, by fault lines between love and business they couldn't reconcile. My hands shook, but I calmed myself before I spoke. "You made your choices under pressure, yes. But the half-truths, the exclusion, that cuts deeper than fear. You dismantled trust." Dad nodded slowly. "I wanted to see you hurt," I whispered. "Wanted you to demand more." And then something unexpected surfaced, the voice I thought had been buried beneath betrayal and exhaustion. Clarity. "I want transparency, yes. I want equity tied to what I've done. I want a seat equal to Ellie's. And I will stay, but only if there is real trust, not just ownership without voice." Silence swallowed the room. Mom placed her hand over mine. Dad exhaled. They glanced at each other, then at me. Finally, Dad said, "That seems fair." Mom nodded. "We'll draft an amended agreement. We'll have a family meeting with Ellie included. We'll open everything." I felt the waters shift beneath me. But then I asked the question that leveled everything. "What does Ellie think about the consultant note?" Dad's face tightened. Mom blinked away tears. They looked at each other. Dad spoke again. "She didn't know we kept that email. She was scared." I realized they were covering for her, but I also saw my sister's vulnerability for the first time. No as rival, but as scared kid in a business she hadn't asked to lead. I frowned. Set the table for honest conversation. No secrets, no surprises. Dad nodded. Yes. They scheduled the full family meeting for Thursday afternoon. I stood, shaken but solid. As I walked out of that office, binder under arm, I sensed my trajectory changed. I wasn't begging for acknowledgement anymore, I was demanding it, and they were ready to give. That whole morning, I moved through the showroom differently. Staff nodded. Clara offered a faint smile of hope. Vendors we met with nodded approval when I explained the family meeting. Everything felt infused with possibility. At my desk, the printed letter lay in plain sight. I looked at it and understood. My voice had found a new channel, not on sent pages, but live negotiation. I gathered my MLB sheets, equity frameworks, board structure proposals. I called Hannah. We're rescheduling. Document ready. She replied, calm and quick. Smart pivot, you're in control. That afternoon, as I walked out to get coffee, I realized I was crying same tears of hurt, but now mingled with resolve and redemption. When the day ended and I rose from my desk, I felt just for a moment that I was reborn in the place I never thought I could fully belong again. Because this twist wasn't just about the truth being exposed, it was about healing doors opening. And though the rooms ahead would test us all, I was ready to walk through them without fear, but with love still tethered to hope. Thursday arrives like a storm gray clouds pressing low over the shop's windows, casting the whole showroom in a muted light that feels appropriate for the reckoning ahead. And I stand at the head of the conference room table, spine straight, pulse grounded, binder in hand, ready to walk into the most important conversation of our lives. This time, all four of us sit facing each other. Ellie, Mom, Dad with the lawyer present for clarity, and the air thrums with tension so sharp you could slice it with a fine, honest word. No investors, no staff, no audience. Just family. I open, voice calm yet firm. Thank you for coming. This meeting isn't about titles or optics, it's about truth, trust, and fairness. I slide my binder toward them, open to a spreadsheet labeled Equity versus Contribution. I've spent weeks gathering data emails, meeting minutes, financial contributions, decisions, because if we're going to build something together, we need clarity on the foundation. I look at Elise steady, unguarded. She nods, a quiet acknowledgement of respect. Dad clears his throat. We've seen the documents, we're ready to discuss. Mom squeezes his hand. The lawyer shifts forward. I turn to Ellie. You received a consultant email suggesting I be held accountable if things go sideways. That shows fear, not malice, but we need to acknowledge it. Can we talk about what that means? Ellie inhales sharply, glances at our parents. Then she meets my eyes and exhales. Rachel, I was scared. I was unprepared. I didn't know how to carry the weight and I panicked. But I never wanted you to fail, I wanted you to hold me up if I fell. Her voice cracks. But I didn't tell you. I hid. She closes her hands in her lap. I'm sorry. The room trembles with honesty, the kind I've yearned for. Mom's lips quiver. Thank you for speaking. Dad simply nods, relief and remorse folded into one expression. I feel tears I haven't noticed rise, but I swallow them. I pivot. I'm not here for apologies, I'm here for action. I clear my throat. I appreciate that and I forgive you. But forgiveness needs follow-up. I point to the spreadsheet. Equity needs to align with contribution. I propose 40% to Ellie, 40% to me, 20% to Mom and Dad as founding members, with a vesting schedule over 3 years tied to performance metrics. I explain each metric. Revenue growth, operational efficiency, brand development. My tone is crisp, intentional, confident. The lawyer jots notes. Ellie glances at each line. Dad leans back, thoughtful. Mom's brow furrows, as though mapping the implications of numbers. Then Dad responds, that's structured, well thought out. Ellie shifts. I'm open. I want this to work. I want partnership, not ownership alone. We sit in silence, letting the moment land. Then Mom brings forth her own idea. Let's create a family charter: shared values, conflict resolution steps, revisit these terms annually. We can ask an external board member to review. I nod slowly. This is more than equity. It's the framework to protect trust. Ellie raises her hand. And I'll lead design. Rachel leads operations. We'll present together to investors next month. Relief, determination, and pride swim in her voice. We're aligning ourselves in front of each other. No hierarchy, no assumption, just partnership. Tears finally come no from grief, but from fullness. I exhale slowly. Dad's voice cracks as he says, "I'm proud of both of you." Mom squeezes my hand. Ellie smiles through tears. The lawyer recaps, agreement on equity split, charter, leadership roles, accountability metrics, external advisor. We all nod. Official signatures are printed. It isn't perfect, but it is real, binding, rooted in trust, renewed. After we sign, I stand and slip my arms around both parents, then Ellie steps in. We hold for a moment, 3 siblings, 4 parents joined over truth and reconciliation. We leave the room differently than we entered, not broken pieces, but woven threads. Emerging adults, first-generation builders, siblings, and parents learning to work together as equals. The tension isn't erased, it's transmuted. Later, in the inner hallway, I catch Dad's eye and whisper, "Thank you for listening, for changing." He nods, voice thick. "So proud of you, Rachel." Ellie and I walk toward the showroom floor, side by side. I point out a new sample board. She smiles and says, "Tell me what you see." I analyze grain, scale, layout. We're back in sync. Not because hierarchy disappeared, but because mutual trust and respect took its place. As the day draws to a close and evening light softens the showroom, I feel the weight lift and the possibility expand. We faced the worst alone, including ourselves, and we chose to rebuild. This confrontation didn't bury the past, it acknowledged it. It didn't erase the pain, it honored it. And it didn't promise smooth days, but created a foundation real enough to walk on. I glance at Ellie, and in that look is everything. Forgiveness, partnership, siblinghood restored not by blood alone, but by shared vision and earned trust. And as the lights dim, I realize this is the moment we all became born again, not just as family or business, but as equals moving forward together. The afternoon sunlight filtered gently through the tall showroom windows as I entered the space, not as a sidelined employee or a courtesy figure, but as an equal partner, shining with a confidence I'd almost forgotten I possessed, and the energy that greeted me was different. Colleagues offered genuine smiles, not the polite nods of reassurance. Employees who once looked away met my gaze with respect. Even suppliers called to confirm project scopes, thanking me for my leadership. It felt surreal and unreal, like stepping from a gray past into vivid clarity where every action and every step I took was recognized, not just as something expected of me, but as something essential. The equity agreement had been finalized that morning. Ellie and I each officially held 40%, Mom and Dad shared the remaining shares, and our board charter had been signed by an external advisor. Invoices now bore both our names. Bank correspondence addressed design and operations co-leads. Even the website was updated. Morgan & Sons, a family legacy. Co-led by Rachel and Ellie Morgan. Each line felt like vindication, as though the world was finally noticing what had been clear all along. Later that afternoon, Ellie and I stood at the head of the showroom in front of a small gathering of staff, sharing the news. My voice trembled at first, not from fear, but from the pure weight of everything we'd endured and overcome. And when Ellie looked at me and squeezed my hand, I felt our journey flash through my mind. The betrayal, the silence, the demands for ownership. The family meeting that changed it all. I introduced our new family charter, our roles, our vision. I looked at every face, their eyes, bright, slight relief there, unspoken congratulations, and said, "This space belongs to all of us, and together we'll shape its future." I named individuals by achievements and thanked them for believing in something bigger than any of us alone. It wasn't a speech. It was a victory cry, and it echoed long after the applause settled. That evening, I walked through empty aisles of handcrafted cabinets, the polished wood glowing under warm lights, and I felt a deep gratitude settle in my bones. Gratitude, not just for the title or the equity, but for the journey, the pain, the transformation. I realized that justice isn't always about punishment. It's about recognition, restoration, and the restoration of relationships that matter. Somewhere between the confrontation and the co-lead announcement, a new respect had taken root. Mine, theirs, ours. At home, Dad invited me into his study. He placed a small, framed photo on his desk as three Morgan women, laughing during our first joint project presentation years ago. "You two together make this company stronger," he said quietly, voice thick with pride. "And I'm grateful to be part of it." It was the moment I understood this wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness rewarded. It was justice served, one based on dignity, equality, and love that survived disruption. Later that night, I sent the printed letter to my personal file sent, but no longer needed. I closed my eyes, thinking of every late night, every silent fear, every data chart and memo that carried my fight. And as I drifted to sleep, I smiled not because the battle was over, but because I knew it had borne something more powerful. Authenticity, partnership, and the knowledge that I could stand tall in both the business and the heart of my family without ever being erased again. The morning after our co-lead announcement, I walked into the showroom with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. No tension twisting in my chest, no weight of invisibility pressing down, just a steady pulse of purpose and belonging. The staff greeted me with genuine warmth. Even those who once exchanged glances now spoke to me first. As I reviewed order schedules and checked memos, I felt the familiar hum of creation under my fingertips, the joy of possibility flowing through each detail. For the first time in a long time, work didn't feel like a battlefield, it felt like home again. At midday, Ellie and I met for lunch on the back patio, sunlight glinting off the cafe table as we laughed over shared memories from our childhood late-night pizza after big project deliveries. Spontaneous sister dance breaks in the showroom, Mom's habit of tucking sticky notes into our lunch bags. She smiled a little tenderly and said, "I'm proud of us." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Me too." That afternoon, I took a walk by the river that runs through Boulder, the water swift and sure and clear against the rocks, and I felt the years of turmoil flow off my back like a long winter drifting into spring. I paused to look at the reflection in the water, someone calm, resolved, healed, and acknowledged to myself that I'd changed. I was stronger, softer, more honest. I had earned this. Back at the shop, I hosted our first collaborative design ops meeting, and the synergy was tangible. Ellie introduced a bold new cabinetry line and stepped aside gracefully when it came to logistics details, and I coordinated with warehouse, marketing, and vendors to align timelines and costs. Our teamwork felt synchronized, more than it ever had when we simply worked alongside each other, the boundaries clear and mutual respect flowing both ways. We didn't talk about hierarchy, just about ideas, structure, creativity, efficiency. That evening, I hosted our first family gathering in months, pizza and laughter in Dad's backyard. Kids from across the group chat ran around chasing a frisbee while adults sipped iced tea under string lights. Mom caught my eye and smiled. Dad clinked his glass with Ellie's, then mine, and said, "To family and new beginnings." I raised my glass, late to the ritual, but full of meaning. Later, I slipped into my office and flicked off the overhead light, leaving only the desk lamp aglow, soft, intentional. I called Hannah to confirm the next board meeting and whispered, "I'm good now. We're good." She paused and said something I thought I'd never hear. "You deserve this." I closed my eyes and let her words settle. I checked my phone. A message from Clara. "Really amazing things happening. Thank you." I typed back quickly. "We did this together, and I meant it." Before bed, I opened my journal, those long pages once strewn with pain, and wrote a new line, "Home again." I paused, pen hovering, and added lines of gratitude. Family, truth, partnership, growth. I thanked myself for fighting, for refusing to let someone else write my story. As I turned off the lamp and climbed into bed, I felt a quiet happiness, a life reclaimed, a family restored, a business reborn not on inheritance alone but on true partnership. The future stretched before me, unwritten, but no longer uncertain. I drifted to sleep with Ellie's words echoing softly. "I'm proud of us." And I thought, me too, little sister. Me too. I lie here in the quiet darkness of my bedroom, the soft hum of the night breeze rustling through the curtains, and I realize how oddly peaceful it feels after months of storms, like standing on a shore after a tempest. Heart still racing but body steady, senses attuned to the rhythmic pull of tides and the promise of mornings yet to come. This journey from painted betrayals to fractures in trust, from isolation to negotiation, from legal plates to co-lead titles, has been the hardest thing I've ever faced, yet also the most profoundly clarifying. When I first walked into that showroom as a sidelined daughter, I carried disappointment like a heavy cloak, each thread spun from years of work unseen, contributions unrecognized, and loyalty treated like an unspoken expectation. I lost sleep, I shed tears in empty conference rooms. I learned that even love can bar doors when fear outweighs faith. But every tear taught me a truth: that I am not my silence, I'm not my pain, I'm not what people assume I should take or what they think I deserve. I am my purpose, my voice, my determination to claim rightful space without sacrificing dignity. Being co-lead now doesn't erase the bruises, but it honors them with the gravity they deserve. It's not a consolation prize, it's a recognition of partnership born from conflict resolved, from vulnerabilities acknowledged, from promises made and renewed. I think about Ellie. I see her now as someone I helped grow, someone I love, someone who carries her own insecurities and fears but chose to walk toward repair rather than flee. But I also see myself stronger, clearer, wiser. I read back through my journal entry from that darkest night. Do I even belong anymore? I see the question still there, but now replaced with an answer: yes. I belong, not because someone gave me a title, but because I seized my worth. I belong because I spoke truth when silence felt easier, and because I built bridges where walls were rising. I belong because I never accepted replacements silently. To anyone who has been overlooked, undermined, or overshadowed by family, by workplace, by expectation, I want you to know you are not invisible just because someone failed to see you. Your contributions matter. Your voice matters. Your heart matters. And sometimes, the hardest step forward is the one where you insist both heart and mind are honored, not just used. This isn't just my story. It's a story of reclamation for all of us who stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. It's a reminder that while love without trust is fragile, trust built in transparency is unbreakable. It's proof that inheritance isn't merely handed down, it's fought for, remembered, and earned, again and again. I close my eyes now, thinking of tomorrow, scheduling a design ops strategy session, a board meeting, dinner with parents, maybe time with Ellie on the patio. And in each gentle expectation, I feel not dread or obligation, but anticipation. Because this isn't just moving forward, it's moving together, holding each other up rather than pushing each other away. I reach over and flick off the bedside lamp. The room settles into comforting shadow, and for the first time in a long time, I sleep without fear that I'm losing ground. Because I've learned that the ground we stand on is not always solid beneath our feet, but when we stand in truth, stand in love, and stand for each other, we build foundations no transfer, no betrayal, no fear can shake. And so, if you find yourself standing on that shoreline after the storm, I invite you to breathe. This moment is yours. Your story isn't over. And though the night can seem endless, dawn always follows, carrying soft light, hope renewed, and the promise that you too can reclaim what is yours.